the 7-year no interest car loan. Why would we need 0% interest car loans at 7 years if the economy was doing so good? Well, that's because the banks have been completely unleashed, pushing asset prices higher, including the cost of automobiles. Hey everybody, JJ here. It is Saturday, November 7th, 2020. Appreciate you joining. Let's take a look at this insanity. We're going to talk about rising car prices. The new Hummer, the 2022 Hummer, is going to be coming out. It's an electric vehicle. It's going to be more than $100,000. So I think these loans, these 7-year loans, are preparing for people to take on just enormous amounts of debt, and it's real dangerous. Let's get into the news. All right, now before we get into this, let me know what you think. To me, this sounds crazy. 7 years, no interest loans. And we know what these loans do. They cause people to go out and buy a higher priced vehicle. They allow people to fit a higher priced vehicle into their budget because the monthly payment is going to be a bit lower with zero interest, and you are extending the loan out to 7 years. And if your car is a piece of junk, it might not last you 7 years. So I think 7-year loans are a bad idea. Even if you're going to pay it off early, if there's no prepayment penalty, you're still paying an overinflated price because, again, this type of lending pushes asset prices higher. Just look at the 2008 housing bubble and the current housing bubble that we're in right now with all the loose lending. And yes, let's recap this. There is loose lending going on. Let's go back, and I know a lot of you know this, but there's a lot of new viewers here. I want to kind of recap what's been happening here in 2020. And this is what I mean when I say banks have been unleashed. In March of this year, at the beginning of the lockdown recession, okay, the Fed slashed interest rates near zero. We knew about that, but something that's very underreported, the banks do not have to have any money now in reserves. That means they can technically loan out unlimited amounts of money without having to have any in reserves. Let's take a look at this article right here out of American Banker. All right, we're going to scroll down here in this article, and it's announced. It's been announced in many places, but very little news media covering this. Additionally, the Fed will reduce the reserve requirements to 0% effective March 26th. So you can see they didn't waste much time getting the banks to be able to lend out more and unlimited amounts of money technically. Right? Now, it used to be that the banks did have to have at least a fraction in reserves or in deposits in their coffers, so to speak, to allow them to lend out money. It was typically between 2 and 5%, which still was a very heavy leveraged banking system or way to lend. Right? So you're loaning out 90% more money than you have in deposits. That's dangerous enough. Starting in March, they don't have to have any money in deposits. So if everyone pulled their money out of the bank, I doubt that would ever happen, but if everybody went and took their money out of their savings account, out of their checking accounts, they cashed out their CDs, liquidated them, the bank technically has no money in reserves, they can still lend out as much money as they want to. A zero reserve requirement. That's huge. Right? Remember, before that, back in October of last year, I can't believe it's been over a year now, but October 2019, remember the repo crisis, because at that time, banks did have reserve requirements. Now, if you go to the Fed's numbers, and this is the repo operations, you're going to see zeros across the board because the banks no longer need repo liquidity injections. Why? Because, again, there's no reserve requirement. They don't need liquidity injections to meet the reserve requirements. Simple, right? So banks are unleashed. That's what I mean by saying banks are unleashed. And many of you were surprised to see asset prices go higher. And I said back in March, I said, hey, this is going to keep these bubbles inflated and going higher. People say, JJ, you're crazy. There's record amounts or the most unemployment that we've seen since the Great Depression. Right? Enormous food lines. Millions of people behind on their mortgages and their rents. And I said, nope, prices can still go higher. It's all about the lending and the banking system. So let's circle back around now. Now with asset prices being pushed up, and we'll talk about car prices here in a minute, now they have to resort to these 7-year loans, zero interest, because now car prices are so high that more and more people cannot fit the payment into their budget. So I wouldn't be surprised to see 8, 9, 10-year loans, and I've even heard about those in some cases. Another NP article right here, a pandemic sticker shock. Used car prices are through the roof. This is a recent article, October 28th. And a nice chart they give us here out of this article. Wholesale used car prices, we saw the drop at the beginning of the lockdown recession. And this is the Manheim Used Vehicle Index. And then what do we see? The banks are unleashed. Basically, we're given a ticket to continue to lend even through the uncertainty and economic devastation and massive unemployment. And what do we see? We saw a record surge in car prices, exactly the opposite of what most people would have expected in this type of environment, the lockdown recession. And if you look at the other markets, a lot of those markets also reacted similarly. People didn't expect, most people anyway, didn't expect stock prices to rebound as heavy as they did. And now we see near all-time highs and new all-time highs on some indexes. And again, we told you this was going to happen. They're going to push the markets up, the asset prices, the bubbles. And here we are now at all-time high car prices. And this represented a 15% year-over-year price jump. That's enormous. And used vehicle prices are now averaging $22,470. That's an $1,800 increase just since the start of 2020. Pretty insane, right? And there's a quote here. Quote, anyone or anybody who tracks them would be shocked, I think almost flabbergasted, unquote, says Ivan Drury, Senior Director of Insights at Edmunds, an automobile information company. Well, if you've been on this channel, you are not shocked. You are not flabbergasted. You know, and I've said this hundreds of times, the banks can loan out endless amounts of money. It's not just currency or debt created by the Fed. It's the banking institutions, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, your credit union, creating money out of thin air, loaning out money that doesn't exist. And that's when we come around and we say debt is money, money is debt. Right? The actual dollar bill itself is a debt note, is a Fed debt note. And if the banking institution's balance sheet begin to look too lopsided, well, the Fed can just come in and buy bundles of debt or bundles of loans from the banks. With what? More money created out of nothing. So that's why we always say this is a Fed-induced economy. This economy or this economic boom, what appears to be a booming economy is Fed-induced, right? It's baseless money-induced, and you're going to see higher prices. Even if everyone were to get laid off, no jobs, prices could still go higher. That's what type of Twilight Zone economy that we're in right now. Right? We also see this in the Fed balance sheet. Now we're about, 3 times higher, 3 times bigger of a run-up than we saw during the financial crisis. So we are at financial crisis times 3 at this point, and this ball game is just getting started. This is going to get even wackier, even crazier, I guarantee. Fasten your seatbelts. Please don't go get yourself into a 7-year no-interest loan. It's likely going to mean that you're just paying more for the car. Because again, the salesperson, they're going to want to maximize. They're going to want to get you with the most expensive car that fits into your monthly budget. That is their job. And be careful out there. Stay safe. Stay safe, stay well, stay prepared. All right. Shocking, surprised. Let me know what you think down in comments. I personally am not surprised. This was fully expected. That's how the current system works. Thanks everybody for watching. Peace.